and welcome back to My Creative Life with Kel Sweetie, where we make things, we create things, we read books, and essentially do whatever our creative hearts desire. Today we will be talking about my November TBR. It has changed a little bit since the beginning of this month. I kind of had an idea of what it was, and then I kind of gave a challenge for myself, and because of said challenge, my TBR definitely changed. So let's get into what I'll be reading this month. So this November, I really wanted to get back into reading thrillers and sci-fi and horror and everything, just because doing the one sentence review of books that I've read this year when I passed how many books I read last year, which check that video out, that really showed me that I really went out my comfort zone and I read a lot of books that weren't those genres that I usually read. But I did notice that my reviews have been much lower this year. I've not read as many 5-star books in my opinion, and I think that reason is because I've gone outside of my comfort zone. So now that I've proven that to myself, I can go back to my comfort zone to end the year off now, realizing that and everything. To start off this month, which I've already started reading, low-key, I started reading Our Wives Under the Sea, finally, by Julia Armfield. This queer suspense thriller, which I don't think it's more of a horror. I think people have kind of put it in this like sense of horror. It's even in GOODREADS 66 best horror books in the past 3 years. I don't feel like this is horror. Now, keep in mind, I did start reading this, but I've not like finished it, and I don't know if maybe the end it really gets into horror, but I would say this is more of a suspense thriller, and I don't even know if I would say it's thrilling. It's definitely a suspense novel, and I've loved it so far. But this is definitely one of the books I'll be reading because I've started it, but I've been wanting to read this for the past, I want to say 2 years or so, and I have not been able to find it in stores. People keep on selling it out. I'm gonna be honest, I thought that this book was thicker than this. It's only about 230 pages, if that, and that's great for me. I'm not mad at that. As I've constantly said on this channel, I love a shorter read, but with packs of punch. I finally found it. I checked out this new Barnes & Noble that opened up near my job and kind of went on a bit of a shopping spree that I wasn't supposed to be on. So now I'm really on a book ban until probably the beginning of the year, unless I run into some big money. But yeah, Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield. I'm finally reading this. Essentially, it's a lesbian couple who, one of them is a marine biologist. She goes on a research mission. They cannot find her for months. They basically declare her dead, and then she resurfaces. And the story of what happens between her and her partner after the resurface and everything, and what that experience is, because she's come back changed, and not just, it seems, mentally. I don't want to give much more off because, like I said, I kind of know a little bit more. I've been wanting to read this for the longest, and so far I'm really happy that I did. The next book that I'm going to be reading that was also one that everybody has been talking about like crazy, and that's What Moves the Dead by Kingfisher. One of my favorite booktubers on here, Riley Marie. I love her horror and thriller recommendations. More times than not, anything she recommends, I usually end up at least liking somewhat. And she loves Kingfisher, but she really, really loves What Moves the Dead. And honestly, every booktuber that I really watch has loved this book. So I thought I'd finally read it. And I think that it was appropriate that I'm going to pick this book up, considering it's based off of the Edgar Allan Poe story, The Fall of the House of Usher, which is now out on Netflix. So I feel like I'll read this and then finally watch the show, which I've been afraid to watch, to be honest, because it's by the same director of The Haunting of Hill House, which I watched Haunting of Hill House and I could not sleep for 2 weeks after that ending. Amazing, amazing show. I know that I'm gonna love this show, but at what cost? Because I need my sleep. I have been putting it off, but I know that after I read this, I will watch the show, finally. It's a short read. Again, thought this was longer. Again, I'm not mad at it. What is this, like 100 and something pages? 150 pages, 150 something pages. Love that for me. Love it. Also, this book cover really is just so amazing. I can't get over how good this book cover is. It's supposed to be like this guy, Alex, is coming back to his childhood home, and what he finds there is essentially this like nightmarish like living standards. His childhood friend Madeline, who's been living there, Madeline Usher, is hearing strange noises and sleepwalking, and her brother are kind of like these weirdos, and there's apparently some sort of like fungal horror happening in here. I don't know what the rabbits have to do with it. I'm interested to see what is making everyone absolutely love this book. I'm hoping that it's not hyped up so much that I'm expecting something amazing in these 150 pages, but we will see. The third book that I am reading is The Last House on Needless Street. I am excited to read this. I might be buddy reading it with Bye Bun Roxanne because our last buddy read was so great. We will see. We will see if it ends up lining up or we end up reading it together. But I have heard a lot about this. It's a little bit mysterious on what the plot line is, but it does have to do with a man who is like alone with his cat and he's lost his daughter. But there's a serial killer going around. I think that a lot of people assume, like, off of that, he must be the serial killer or hearing things or something along those lines. But a lot of people have also talked about this cat who's living with him, and there's a point of view of the cat in the book, which I think sounds interesting. But a lot of people have told me that they are surprised by the ending. It actually is a shocking ending, which even people who like read thrillers all the time are saying that. I love hearing that because the last time I heard that was when I read the plot by Jean Hanif Corlitz, and that still I think is one of my top 5 reads because I literally gasped at the ending because it really took me by surprise. So I feel like I'm hoping that this gives me the same feeling, and we'll see if I end up buddy reading it. But I'm really excited. So far, the books that have been on my TBR are books that are part of the GOODREADS 66 best horror and thriller books that have been published in the last 3 years and stuff. And I'll get more into that in another video, but they said this one's really great. Everyone keeps on saying it's fantastic. I'm excited to see if it lives up to the hype. The fourth book that I plan on reading this month, I do not have yet. I should be getting it in the mail sometime tomorrow because I pre-ordered it, and that is the book that every booktuber I feel like it's going to be talking about and reading for the next couple of months, and that is Iron Flame. It is the second book in the Fourth Ring series by Rebecca Yarros. I did a book review about it because I really didn't think that I was gonna be impressed by it, but everybody kept on saying how amazing this book was. I don't like fantasy. I'm not big on it. I think as a kid I loved it, and at some point I made the switch between fantasy and thrillers and horrors. So I didn't think much of it when I was gonna pick that book up. I picked the book up, could not put it down. It really was so good. Are there some tropes that are used all the time? Yes. Is it like spicy and like overtly so? Yes. Was it a good time though? Absolutely. I loved reading Fourth Wing, and in all honesty, when I was able to pre-order Iron Flame, the second book, I was like, you know what? Why not? They've got me. They've hooked me. Let's see if the second one is just as good. And it's supposed to be coming out tomorrow. As I'm filming this, it's November 5th. So we'll see if that comes in the mail tomorrow or not. But when I'll be reading that, I don't know if I'm going to read it as soon as it gets here or if I'm going to put it off until later on in the month so that I can knock out some of this challenge that I've made myself out of the way. I think it's probably going to be that, which means I'm definitely going to have to dodge some reviews. But it probably won't be a buddy read. Yeah, that's the fourth book that I'm hoping on reading this month and knocking that out of the way and everything. I hope it's just as good as Fourth Wing because really that took me by surprise. And I hope I didn't just like Fourth Wing because of it being surprisingly good for me. Well, I guess we'll see if it's gonna be worth the hype as it was for the first one. I hope it is. That might be just my fantasy like thing that I do. That will be my 4th book of this month. The 5th book that I plan on reading this month, and probably will be the final book. I'm gonna put one more book out there, but I feel like that one is kind of like, because I have 2 shorter books this month to read. So we will see. I'm traveling a lot. There's some holiday season is coming up on us, so I have more time to like read things. So my last book will probably be like, this is maybe. I usually average about 4 to 5 books a month, so this one's like a definite, I know I'm probably gonna finish this one, or like I'm gonna finish 5 type of thing. The next one's like a optional type of thing. Does that make sense? I don't know if that makes sense. I hope it did. All that being said, Dead Silence. Dead Silence by S.A. Barnes. I've heard amazing. This has actually been on my list to read since June, maybe, when Riley Marie here on BookTube had mentioned like it was on like her top list of thrillers and horror to read, and I had added it immediately because it was like a sci-fi thriller horror, and I had just finished reading like Project Hail Mary not too long after. So I think this was actually even further more than June. This has been on there for a while, and when I saw it on GOODREADS best horror list, I was like, okay, I'll finally get around to reading this one. This one is, it takes place in space. Claire Kovalik is on a expedition with her crew. I think that they're like a beacon repair crew and everything. So I guess they go out and they go on these travels to find people and help repair and stuff like that. And they find there's this distress signal, but from this ship, the Aurora, that was like a luxury space liner that people had gone on, and then it had gone missing and everything for years. And they found this and they're thinking, oh, this is a salvage claim and something about it's not right. Pretty sure it's haunted, or maybe like, you know, being lost in space or something. They were lost out there for so long and now they're like there, or maybe they're infected. I don't know, but I've heard that it is amazing and I'm excited to read it. This will count as my sci-fi read since I'm going back into my sci-fi and everything. And you know, I've been wondering lately, like, what's the difference between fantasy and sci-fi? Is it just like, because I feel like both are very fictional. Oh, well, I guess science fiction instead of like things that probably could never happen, like dragons. But I think that they're related. They're like cousins, but not siblings type of thing. I was wondering that today, like at the bookstore. I was at the bookstore, of course I was. And they had put fantasy and science fiction close to each other. And I was it started having me think about like that relation and why I'm not really into fantasy, but I love science fiction. And I kind of started thinking like, okay, well, what's the difference between the two really? Like that would make me like one over the other more. So yeah, I don't know if anybody else has thought about that or if it's just me and everyone's like, Kelsey, that's blatantly clear as to why these two things are different or whatever. I think I was just asking a question because I was just wondering like why I don't like fantasy as much as I like sci-fi, if they're so like kind of closely related. I don't know. Maybe it's because I've never heard of much like fantasy horror or fantasy thrillers. But there's always sci-fi thrillers, there's always sci-fi horrors, even in movies and stuff, but I don't. And if there are recommendations that y'all have to give for fantasy horror or fantasy thriller, like, I don't know, like dragons and serial killers or something. Has anybody done that? Is there just not a want for that in the fantasy, like, audience? I'm like, now I'm about to go down a rabbit hole. We're gonna move on to the next book. But that is the current question that's probably gonna be lingering in my mind for the next couple of weeks. It's if that's a thing. I'm probably going to Google it. Or I probably already have, and there's a pop-up that's going to show up on the screen about the fact that that is a genre. That's definitely a genre, and there are books out there for that. The last optional book, but isn't like on my official TBR for this month, especially since that would make 6 books, and I'm almost positive that unless I really have nothing to do, which we all know that's not the case, then I'll read it, and I kind of feel like this would be better as like a kind of cozy thing for the end of the year. I'm dragging it out. The last book on my list is The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. Another author that I feel like every booktuber is just crazy about. They love Becky Chambers, and they're talking about cozy like sci-fi and everything. Now, I thrifted this. I got lucky enough that I found this book at a Savers, and pretty positive whoever had it, they were reading it and they were like, don't like this, so I'm unhauling it, because you can look at the spine and you can see that it's broken only a third of the way in. And I don't think that, you know, they tried to make it through halfway, it looks like, as well. It's nearly mint. So I was like, well, this is $3. I'm picking this up. I've been wondering like what everybody's been loving about this book. However, it is a cozy sci-fi, and as we know, I like things fast-paced. I'm not a huge, I hated, absolutely dredged through reading Under the Whispering Door, and I had so many people recommend that book to me. They said they cried, that they said it really hit all of their heartstrings. I read that book, and it's not that it wasn't cute, but there were no stakes. And I get that's the point of cozy books, is that, oh, these are low stakes, there are no stakes, this makes me feel good. And instead, I'm just sitting here and I'm bored because the high stake, like, it's like people who watch action films. It's like so that they don't have to like think, because it's all coming at them. It's like eye candy. That's how I feel about high impact thrillers or horrors or whatever. I feel like that's why I love them so much. And reading cozy just bores me. I'm like, what's the point? Why are we doing this? Is it just because like it makes us feel good inside? That's fine, and it's cute, and it's not that like it's not nice. It's just boring for me to read. So I thought I would give this a chance. One, because I absolutely love this cover. This is a great cover. Hold up. Is it focusing? I need to focus. It's focusing. In my opinion, I really love it. I love the covers on these. Again, other booktubers that I trust do love these books, so I'm gonna see how it feels. Really, the short version of this is the main character is Rosemary Harper, and she joins the crew of the Wayfarer, and essentially this ship ends up in this way station, like this pit stop in the galaxy and everything. And it's kind of, I guess, like what happens at this pit stop with this crew and everything, and the idea of found family again and all of that. I'm hoping it's not, I'm hoping that it's just a bit more interesting than Under the Whispering Door, because I feel like Under the Whispering Door I think it'll be, again, that conversation of fantasy versus sci-fi, because I feel like Under the Whispering Door, with the elements and the conversations it was talking about, it was more cozy fantasy, and this is cozy sci-fi. So maybe because I'm not a huge fan of fantasy, but I love sci-fi, that is the main like factor for me to like cozy. I don't know. We will see. We'll see if I even get to this. It may be a December read, because I feel like this would be a good December read because of the cozy factor and everything like that. This is optional. I'm gonna probably put like an asterisk next to it, because if I don't get to this but I finish everything else, I'm probably gonna take it as a win. A win is a win. I'll be like, yes, I finished my TBR. This was optional. So that's it, y'all. That is my TBR for this month. As you probably noticed, I did not include a series of unfortunate events this month because I feel like I'm starting to put this pressure on me to finish it before the end of the year, just because, well, I got it a year ago, almost coming up on a year now, and I feel like I should finish it by now. They're not long, as I've said in like other videos and everything, but I feel like I'm not being drawn to read them. Maybe during the holiday and everything I will be. I've also kind of warmed up to maybe listening to the audiobook, especially after figuring out that they're read by Tim Curry, who is part of the cult classics Clue and Rocky Horror Picture Show. But I've just not been drawn to read them, and I think me just having the reasoning of not wanting a full year to go by and I still haven't finished this series, and kind of seeing that as like a failure to a challenge that I made for myself and got as a gift from somebody else, I just feel like that doesn't make any sense. And it's putting pressure on me to read something that at the end of the day, if I don't want to read it, it's like, well, you didn't want to read it. Like, you know, I'm taking the pressure off of myself to read that series. If I gravitate towards it and to read it, and I have time or whatever the case is, then I will do so. I don't want to also include that in my book ban. Like, if I finish all of the books that are currently on like my TBR shelf, and I go out and buy another book, I'm not going to count like me not finishing these books as a part of my book ban, just because, again, I don't want to force myself to read something. Like, I have plenty of other books on my shelf that I've not read, but I've not read them because I'm not gravitated to them. Like, as soon as I feel like, oh, I'm in this like area to read those things again, that's when I move them to my TBR shelf. I have so many memoirs to read. I have Audre Lorde's Sister Outsider to read. I have The Tao of Wu, which is a Wu-Tang memoir to read. I still have to read the Tupac memoir that I bought back in college. I still have Prince's memoir to read. I still have Jimi Hendrix's memoir to read. I still have the J Dilla book that I read, that I bought like, I want to say maybe February of this year, January of this year. Maybe it was even last year now that I think about it. I still have plenty of memoirs to read, but I know for a fact right now I am not in a memoir reading mood. So I'm not going to move that to my TBR shelf, knowing that I'm just forcing myself to read those books. Because when I bought them, I was under the impression that I was wanting to read those books, and then struggled to move through them to the point where I had to DNF them. You know, it's not just that. Like, I have a couple of other books that like are here on the shelf, and I like Book Eaters. Book Eaters at one point in time will maybe get read. Maybe it'll be December. I don't know. Maybe it'll be cozy enough for me to like read it and think that it's interesting. It just really didn't pay off. But I say all that to just say I am trying to teach myself that you not reading a book or finishing a book is not a failure. The whole reason why you're doing this is so that you can enjoy yourself. And if you're not enjoying yourself while you're reading a book, like enough where you're just like, I cannot finish this at all, and I don't even care how the end is, then what's the point? So, that being said, I hope that's not the case with any of these books that I have this month. But I am excited to move through this mini challenge that I've kind of created for myself of reading these books on the GOODREADS book challenge. Well, not book challenge, but 66 best horror books. I hope it's another good reading month. I feel like last month was a good reading month, and it got me past this slump that I had during the summer. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that I started reading horror and thriller again. So let's hope for the best with November, and I'll see y'all in the wrap up. Bye.